World War I and returned to his Tennessee home of America's outstanding doughboy, the redoubtable Sergeant York. The sergeant, born and raised here in Pall Mall, Tennessee, came from a typical backwoods family. His mother is proud of his accomplishments. And Brother Robert gets a German helmet as a souvenir. The sergeant's aunts, Nancy, Sarah, and Ann, pure early American. A second elder in this church, Sergeant York was a conscientious objector during the early stages of World War I, but when he got into action, he killed 25 Germans single-handed and captured 132, including a major and 3 lieutenants, and is credited with putting 35 enemy machine guns out of action. Nothing backwoods about this backwoods boy, America's #1 World War I hero. This is Sergeant York.
Welcome to Echoes of Valor, where the forgotten voices of history return to life. In this special 10-part series, we journey deep into the heart of World War I to uncover the extraordinary story of Alvin C. York, a humble farmer from the Tennessee mountains who rose from obscurity to become one of the most celebrated heroes in American military history. Across these episodes, we will follow York from his quiet beginnings in rural Appalachia through the inner battles of faith and duty that shaped him, and finally onto the brutal fields of the Meuse-Argonne Offensive, where one man's conviction changed the course of a battlefield and echoed across generations. This is the story of courage, conscience, and destiny. This is Echoes of Valor. Before Alvin York was a soldier, before medals, headlines, or legends, he was simply Alvin, a young man born into the rugged hills of Pall Mall, Tennessee. In these remote mountains, life was hard, simple, and honest. Families worked the land, hunted the forests, and relied on one another to endure seasons of scarcity. And for the York family, 12 children, a small cabin, and a patchwork of rocky farmland survival was not a choice. It was a way of life. Alvin grew up barefoot on red clay soil, learning to shoot long before he learned to write his name. A rifle wasn't a weapon in his world, it was a tool, a necessity, a means of feeding hungry mouths. His mother, Mary, taught the importance of faith and humility. His father, William, taught responsibility and the unspoken expectation that every child must do their part to support the family. But hardship shapes people in different ways. When Alvin was still in his teens, his father died suddenly, leaving Alvin, one of the older sons, burdened with the duty of providing for the entire family. It was a moment that would imprint itself deeply on him, forging the first layers of the discipline and resolve that later defined him. Yet Alvin York was far from perfect in his early years. He was known across the valley for his fiery temper and nights of drinking and brawling, rough behavior born from stress, grief, and the wild energy of youth. Locals described him as a man with a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other, constantly fighting within himself. His life hovered between responsibility and recklessness, between Sunday morning hymns and Saturday night trouble. Everything changed slowly. Then suddenly, when Alvin attended a revival meeting led by Pastor Pyle of the Church of Christ in Christian Union, something in the sermons spoke to him: the call to righteousness, the warning against violence, the commandment to love one's neighbor. Alvin felt the weight of his own turmoil, his own failings, and one night, he fell to his knees in a moment of profound transformation. From that point forward, Alvin York vowed to live by faith, to lay down his anger, his drinking, and even, if God required it, the rifle he had carried all his life. He embraced pacifism, believing deeply that violence, in any form, was against his faith. In the quiet hills where he was born, Alvin began to change. Slowly, steadily, purposefully. He did not know it yet, but the same hills that shaped him would one day send him across an ocean into the heart of the deadliest war the world had ever seen. And the same man who once swore never to take another life would soon be forced to confront the true meaning of courage. War has a way of reaching even the most remote corners of the world. In the quiet mountains of Tennessee, the news of America entering World War I spread slowly. Rumors whispered in general stores. Headlines passed from hand to hand, names drawn on draft notices nailed to post office walls. And one autumn morning in 1917, among those names was Alvin York. For a man who had sworn himself to peace, the draft letter felt like a summons to an impossible choice. The laws of his country on one side, the laws of his faith on the other. Alvin's hands trembled as he traced the printed words. This was not a quarrel between neighbors or a dispute over land. This was a global conflict, nations collapsing, empires burning, millions dead. And now, the U.S. Army was calling him to take up a rifle again, to march into a war he neither understood nor believed in. Guided by the teachings of his church, he submitted a request for conscientious objector status, declaring that his religious convictions forbade him from killing. It was not an act of cowardice. Alvin had never feared hardship, but an act of conscience, of obedience to what he believed God required. Yet the government denied his plea. His church was not recognized by federal regulations. His path, it seemed, was already chosen. Alvin reported for induction, quiet and solemn, boarding the train to Camp Gordon in Georgia, a place far from home, filled with strangers, noise, and the steel discipline of military life. He arrived with a heavy heart, carrying not only his Bible, but the weight of uncertainty. How could he serve without betraying his faith? How could he obey the army without disobeying God? At Camp Gordon, his commanders noticed immediately that York was different, polite, hard-working, but deeply torn. Instead of forcing him, they tried something rare, understanding. Captain Danforth and Major Buxton, two seasoned officers, took the time to speak with him, to listen, to ask questions few soldiers were ever asked. They discussed scripture, morality, and the nature of duty in a world consumed by war. One evening, after long talks and hours of prayer, Buxton gave York a leave of absence to return home and seek clarity. Back in the mountains, Alvin walked alone along the ridges, his Bible in hand, searching for answers in the wind and the quiet valleys that had shaped him since childhood. Could a man fight and still be righteous? Could he take up a weapon not out of hate, but out of a duty, to protect others? For days he wrestled with the question, and slowly a realization settled in his heart. Perhaps the greatest service he could offer was not to refuse the fight, but to stand in it with a clean conscience, guided by faith rather than anger. When Alvin returned to Camp Gordon, he was a changed man, not eager for war, but resolved to serve honorably, trusting that God would guide his hand and spare his soul from unnecessary violence. He did not yet know the role destiny had reserved for him. He did not yet know that history would test this new resolve in the most brutal and unimaginable way. But for the first time, Alvin York walked onto the parade grounds with steady steps, not as a reluctant soldier, but as a man prepared to face whatever lay ahead. Camp Gordon was not just a training ground, it was a furnace. And like all furnaces, it burned away weaknesses, shaped raw recruits into warriors, and revealed the true character of every man who passed through its gates. For Alvin C. York, it became the place where doubt transformed into discipline, and discipline into destiny. The early days were harsh. Rows of recruits marched in tight formation under the Georgia sun, rifles clattering against shoulders, sergeants barking commands that echoed across the dusty fields. York, who had spent a lifetime roaming free in the Tennessee hills, now found himself bound to the rigid rhythm of the army, left, right, each step a reminder of the duty he had chosen to accept. But something remarkable began to happen. The man who had once resisted the very idea of war started to excel in the very skills the army demanded. York's upbringing had prepared him in ways no one expected. His years of hunting in the wilderness had given him an uncanny aim, steady, patient, precise. When he squeezed the trigger, the bullet found its mark with a consistency that stunned his instructors. He quickly rose to the top of every marksmanship test, hitting targets at distances where other recruits struggled to even see the silhouettes. Word spread through the barracks. That Tennessee boy can shoot. Yet it wasn't just skill that set York apart. It was his demeanor, quiet, humble, focused. He never bragged, never boasted. He carried his rifle with respect, as if it were both a tool and a burden. Fellow soldiers noticed how he prayed softly to himself at night, how he read from his Bible by lantern light, how he treated even the harshest sergeants with patient courtesy. It wasn't long before York was promoted to corporal. His men admired him, trusting his calm presence and steady judgment. He became a natural leader not through loud commands, but through example. But training was about more than marching and shooting. York and his regiment learned the brutal new realities of modern warfare. They studied gas masks, trenches, machine gun nests, artillery barrages, deadly innovations that had transformed old-fashioned battlefields into nightmares of mud and steel. They practiced digging trenches, crawling under barbed wire, and advancing through simulated machine gun fire. Every lesson carried the same grim message: Europe was a graveyard, and only the ready would survive it. Still, even as York grew into a soldier, a quiet tension lingered inside him. He knew the day would come when all this training would be tested on foreign soil. He knew he might be asked to take lives, even as he prayed to preserve them. But he also believed that he was being prepared for something beyond duty, beyond obedience, something only God could see. In June of 1918, the orders arrived. The 82nd Division, the All-American Division, was shipping out. France awaited them, the war awaited them, fate awaited them. As Alvin York boarded the troopship, he stepped away from the world he knew and into the storm-torn heart of history. The hills of Tennessee were behind him now. Ahead lay the trenches of the Western Front, where a single decision would soon make him a legend. The crossing to Europe was long, tense, and filled with an unease that settled into the bones of every soldier aboard. The troopship rolled over the vast Atlantic, its decks crowded with young men leaning against rails, staring out at endless grey waves, each one silently wondering what awaited them on the other side. Among them stood Corporal Alvin C. York, his rifle cleaned, his Bible tucked safely in his jacket pocket. France greeted the Americans not with grandeur, but with a somber landscape bruised by years of war. Roads were torn, forests splintered, villages reduced to stone skeletons. The very air seemed heavy with smoke, history, and grief. For York, raised in untouched mountains, this shattered land was a world he had never imagined. The 82nd Division was quickly moved toward the front lines. Their first major assignment was defensive, holding parts of the Street Mihil sector. Instead of sweeping fields and familiar hills, York walked through zigzagging trenches, narrow earthen corridors that stank of mud, sweat, and fear. The distant thunder of artillery was constant, shaking the ground like an angry heartbeat. York watched as shells arced overhead, exploding in distant blooms of fire. He saw stretcher-bearers stumble past with wounded men whose cries were muffled by bandages and blood. He heard, for the first time, the harsh snap of machine gun fire cutting through the wind. War was no longer an idea, it was a living, breathing force surrounding him on all sides. And yet, even here, York remained steady. His calmness became a quiet anchor for the men around him. He offered prayers when asked, shared what little comfort he could, and worked tirelessly through the long nights of trench duty. When rations were short, he gave away his portion. When morale faltered, he spoke softly of home, of faith, of mountains untouched by war. But the trenches taught harsh lessons, too. Gas, alarms in the dead of night, sudden barrages that left the ground trembling, the loss of comrades met only days before. Each moment hardened York not into bitterness, but into an unshakable resolve. The Americans soon joined major offensive operations. Rain turned the trenches into rivers of mire. Soldiers marched for miles under packs so heavy they cut into the shoulders. York's unit pushed through shattered villages where civilians had fled long ago, past orchards blasted to stumps, and fields cratered by years of shelling. Despite all this, the men felt something stirring, a belief that the tide of war might finally be shifting. Their arrival added fresh strength to exhausted Allied lines. Whispers spread through the ranks. The final push was coming, and when it did, their division would play a critical role. York didn't know the details. He only knew that something monumental was nearing, some battle at the end of the horizon, waiting for him and the men beside him. On the evening before the Great Offensive, York sat alone for a moment, carving a small cross into the wooden stock of his rifle. The gesture wasn't decoration, it was a prayer, a reminder, a promise. Soon, the 82nd Division would enter the Meuse-Argonne, the largest and deadliest American operation of the war. Soon, York's beliefs, his training, and his very soul would be put to the ultimate test. And soon, history would call upon him in a way no man could anticipate. The storm was moving closer. The moment that would define Alvin C. York's legacy was approaching. The Meuse-Argonne Offensive began like a thunderclap, the largest American military operation in history, a massive push designed to break the German lines once and for all. For the soldiers of the 82nd Division, including Corporal Alvin C. York, it felt as if the entire world had erupted into fire. It was October 1918. The air was cold, wet, and thick with the smell of cordite. The Argonne forest, dense, tangled, and unforgiving, loomed before them like a dark maze. German positions were hidden everywhere. Machine gun nests dug into hillsides, trenches carved deep into ridges, snipers concealed in shattered trees. The terrain favored the defenders, and the Germans were determined to hold every inch. York and his comrades moved forward at dawn beneath a sky bruised by smoke. As artillery roared overhead, the ground trembled beneath their boots. Trees toppled, dirt rained down. Men instinctively hunched low, clutching their rifles as they advanced into the fog-filled forest. The fighting was brutal from the very first steps. Machine guns chattered from unseen positions, stitching the air with deadly lines of lead. Shells burst overhead, sending splinters of steel and wood flying in all directions. The forest floor became a tangle of fallen branches, tangled wire, and shattered earth. Every yard gained was paid for in blood. York saw men he knew, men he had trained with, laughed with, prayed with, fall to the ground, wounded or silent. Yet he kept moving, driven by a sense of duty and a quiet trust that God would guide him through the chaos. Officers shouted orders that were quickly swallowed by gunfire. Units became tangled, separated, scrambled in the confusion of the forest. Visibility was poor, communication worse. The German defenses were deeper and more organized than anyone had expected. Still, the Americans pressed on. York's battalion was tasked with a mission as dangerous as it was critical. advancing through the heart of the forest, cutting off the German defensive line, and helping to seize critical railroads and supply routes that kept the enemy fighting. Without these, the German army would crumble. But the Germans were prepared. They fought ferociously, using the terrain with deadly skill. Every ridge hid a nest of rifles. Every ravine funneled advancing troops into traps. Every burst of machine gun fire reminded the Americans that they were deep in enemy territory. By the second day, exhaustion weighed heavily on the men. Mud clung to their boots. Their uniforms were soaked, torn, and stained, yet their resolve remained. The offensive was bigger than any one regiment, any one company, any one soldier. It was the weight of the war itself. York's company pressed deeper into the forest, and as they did, the danger intensified. They knew the Germans were out there, close, watching, waiting. Every snapping twig made fingers tighten around rifle grips. What York did not know, what no one knew, was that his moment was just ahead. A moment that would test not just his training, not just his courage, but the very beliefs he carried from the hills of Tennessee. A moment that would turn a quiet corporal into an unforgettable legend. The forest held many secrets. In its shadows, fate was waiting. October 8th, 1918. A date that would forever be carved into the chronicles of courage. The 82nd Division pushed deeper into the Argonne forest, attempting to outflank a series of well-protected German machine gun nests that had halted their advance and pinned entire companies to the muddy ground. Casualties were mounting. The offensive was in danger of stalling. To break the deadlock, a small group of soldiers from Company G and Company H, just 17 men, were ordered to slip around the ridge, locate the machine guns, and take out the position from behind. It was a desperate plan, but the only one left. Among these men was Corporal Alvin C. York. The forest was silent. As they advanced, too silent. Men exchanged uneasy glances. The Germans knew these woods better than the Americans, and every shadow felt like a threat waiting to reveal itself. And then, everything happened at once. A burst of gunfire sliced through the trees. German riflemen hidden along the ridge opened fire. The American patrol hit the ground, returning fire as best they could. In the chaos that followed, York and the surviving men found cover in a small depression. They didn't know it yet, but the Germans were watching, waiting, drawing them in. Pushing forward cautiously, the small patrol managed to surprise a group of German soldiers resting in a clearing offices, nearly 24 men. The Germans surrendered quickly, raising their hands as the Americans surrounded them. Relief washed through the patrol. Maybe, just maybe, this mission would end without further bloodshed. But the moment was fragile, and it shattered instantly. Unbeknownst to the Americans, a line of German machine guns was positioned on a slope above the clearing. When they saw their comrades being taken prisoner, the gunners reacted with ruthless precision. Without warning, the forest exploded. A wall of machine gun fire swept across the clearing, cutting down 9 Americans in seconds, including the patrol's commanding officers. Screams echoed through the trees. The surviving men dove for cover, scattered and confused. When the dust settled, one man found himself in a position no soldier ever expects. Alone, under fire, facing multiple machine guns, with a group of captured German soldiers beside him and his entire patrol depending on what he did next. That man was Alvin York. Pinned down, outnumbered, and staring into the jaws of death, York faced a test unlike anything he had ever imagined. His faith, his training, and his instincts collided in a single heartbeat. Was he to fight? Was he to surrender? Was he to run? York took a breath. A long, steady breath. The kind he had learned to take while hunting in the Tennessee hills. the kind a man takes when the next moment may decide everything. Nearby, the German prisoners looked at him terrified, helpless, unsure whether they would live another minute. Behind them, the machine guns roared again, bullets chewing through branches and soil. York made his decision. He stood up, he raised his rifle, and he walked toward the fire. The world would soon witness an act of bravery so unbelievable that generals would question it, armies would revere it, and history would never forget it. Alvin C. York rose from the ground with a calm that defied the chaos surrounding him. The German machine guns crackled relentlessly, each burst slicing through branches, spraying dirt, and striking the earth mere inches from where he stood. But York moved with the steady determination of a man who had spent a lifetime trusting his aim and trusting his faith. He advanced alone. The German gunners, stunned that a single American was charging straight toward them, focused their fire on York. Bullets snapped past his head, tore through his uniform, and kicked up soil around his boots. Yet he kept moving, taking cover behind small rises in the ground, firing only when he had a clean shot, and when he fired, he never missed. York used the same skills he had honed in the Tennessee hills: calm breath, steady hands, patience. He picked off the nearest German, gunners one by one, targeting those who stood to reload or adjust their aim. Each shot was deliberate, controlled, precise. In moments, the rhythm of the machine guns faltered, but the danger was far from over. A group of 6 German soldiers, bayonets fixed, charged down the hillside to overwhelm York in close combat. They were experienced fighters, desperate and well-trained. York had no time to reload his rifle. Instinct took over. He drew his .45 Colt automatic pistol, and in a scene that would later become legendary, York faced the charging soldiers alone. They ran at him in a line, and York fired methodically, one shot at a time, starting with the man in the back and working forward. He knew that if he shot the front soldier first, the others might scatter or dive for cover, so he aimed from back to front, ensuring none could stop to aid their comrades. Within seconds, all 6 lay motionless. When the echoes faded, the hillside fell eerily silent. No machine guns, no charging soldiers. Only the distant thunder of the larger battle continued to shake the forest. York reloaded and pressed forward again, still alone, still advancing. He moved from nest to nest, forcing surrender after surrender. German soldiers, believing they were surrounded by an entire American assault force, threw down their weapons and began calling out, "Kamerad! Kamerad!" But there was no American force behind York. There was only York himself. By the time he reached the main rise overlooking the German line, the last remaining officer, a German major, was staring at him in disbelief. York had wiped out the machine gun positions that had stopped an entire battalion. The major stepped forward, shaking, and asked York, "How many men have you?" York answered simply, "I got a plenty." The truth was far more astonishing. He was practically alone. The German major assessed the situation, looked at the growing number of surrendered soldiers, and made a fateful decision. He signaled the remaining machine gunners to cease fire. York had done the impossible. He had broken the back of a fortified German position by himself. What happened next would only add to the legend. When the gunfire faded and the smoke lifted over the hillside, Alvin York stood surrounded by stunned German soldiers, 132 of them. Men from multiple machine gun nests, rifle pits, and defensive positions now stood with their hands raised, uncertain of what would happen next. They believed they had been outmaneuvered by an entire battalion. They had not yet realized the truth. One man had broken their line. York, breathing hard but steady, gathered the remaining Americans from the shattered patrol. Only 7 other men were still able to fight. These 8 soldiers, led by York, now faced the nearly impossible task of escorting more than 100 prisoners back through hostile territory. The German major, still shaken, approached York cautiously. With surprising respect, he offered to help bring his own men under control and guide the prisoners down the ridge. He knew that if any German units nearby opened fire on the column, everyone, Americans and prisoners alike, would be caught in the crossfire. York nodded. It was an uneasy alliance, but one born of necessity. And so began one of the most extraordinary scenes of World War I. York, rifle in hand, marched at the head of a column of 132 German prisoners, with only a handful of American soldiers behind him. The prisoners walked quietly, some glancing back at the lone American leading them, whispering to one another in disbelief. How could one man have done this? But the danger was far from over. As the column edged back toward American lines, they passed within sight of other German units. Startled soldiers reached for their weapons, preparing to fire. York stood tall and shouted, warning them to hold back or risk shooting their own men. The German major echoed the warning in his own language, waving for them to stay down. A few rifles were raised. Tension crackled through the air. York tightened his grip on his weapon. Then, slowly, the German rifles lowered. The column moved on. Hours later, as York emerged from the forest clearing, American soldiers froze in shock. They saw an unimaginable sight. A single corporal leading a stream of German prisoners so long it snaked through the trees behind him. Officers rushed forward, believing it must be a mistake. An entire German battalion captured? By one patrol and one man. York approached calmly, saluted, and reported, "Corporal York, sir, reporting with prisoners." The officers stared, speechless. When the final count was made, the numbers astonished everyone. 132 prisoners, multiple machine gun nests destroyed, at least 20 enemy soldiers killed. His actions saved untold numbers of Americans pinned down in the assault. York had accomplished what entire companies had failed to. Word spread quickly. Through the ranks, whispers at first, then awe, then disbelief. Some soldiers thought the story was exaggerated. Others insisted it could only be divine intervention. But all agreed on one thing. What happened that day was unlike anything the war had ever seen. That night, as American units advanced thanks to the gap York had opened, the Tennessee corporal sat quietly by a small fire, cleaning his rifle, saying little. He had no boast, no swagger, just a calm acceptance that he had done what he believed he had to do. He remembered every moment, every shot, every life taken, every life spared. And though he never sought glory, fate had already decided. Alvin C. York would not return home as just another soldier. He would return as a legend. When the chaos of October 8th finally faded and the Meuse-Argonne Offensive pushed forward, the U.S. Army began to gather reports from the front lines. Officers listened as stunned survivors spoke of a single corporal who had silenced multiple machine gun nests and captured more than 100 German soldiers. At first, the higher command didn't believe it, not because they doubted the men reporting it, but because such an achievement seemed impossible. No one soldier, no matter how skilled, could accomplish what York was credited with. But the testimonies kept coming. Captured German officers confirmed the story. Even German machine gunners spoke of the lone American who advanced into their fire as if protected by something unseen. Investigators questioned York, expecting bravado or exaggeration. Instead, they found a soft-spoken Tennessean who talked about the battle the way a farmer might describe a day's work. Calm, humble, matter-of-fact. When asked how he accomplished so much alone, York answered simply, "I can't tell you why I wasn't killed. It was God's will." He did not speak of heroism, he did not speak of glory. He spoke only of duty and of the lives of his comrades who depended on. But the army knew what it had discovered. Within weeks, recommendations for York's recognition reached the highest levels of command. His actions weren't just heroic, they were legendary. The honors begin. By the spring of 1919, Alvin C. York received the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, later upgraded to the Medal of Honor, the French Croix de Guerre, the French Legion of Honor, decorations from Italy and Montenegro. American generals praised him. Allied generals saluted him. Newspapers across Europe printed his name. The story spread across the ocean, where American families desperate for good news embraced York as a symbol of courage, righteousness, and hope. And yet, York remained deeply uneasy with fame. He did not smile when reporters praised him. He did not enjoy the cameras, the headlines, or the parades. When asked why he was so humble, he replied, "I'm just a plain fellow from Tennessee trying to live right." Returning home. When the war finally ended, York boarded the ship back to America with mixed emotions. He was grateful to return, but troubled by the memories of what he had seen and done. The ship's deck was quiet at night, and York often stood alone, staring at the dark sea, thinking of the men who would never sail home. Upon arrival in New York, he was met by cheering crowds and newspaper photographers. A parade was held in his honor. Officials offered him money, speaking tours, movie deals. Promoters promised fortunes if he would simply tell his story on stage. But York refused every offer. He would not profit from the war. "This uniform ain't for sale," he said. Instead, he asked for only one thing: a way to help the children and families in the poor mountain communities where he grew up. A hero returns to Pall Mall. When York finally stepped off the train back in Tennessee, he was greeted not by reporters, but by neighbors, farmers, families, church members, people who knew him simply as Alvin. They celebrated him not for medals, but for the man he had always been: humble, loyal, sincere. He walked back into the hills of Pall Mall carrying the same Bible he had taken to war, and a weight on his heart that only he could understand. He hoped, quietly, that life might return to normal, but fate was not finished with him yet, for the world would not let Alvin C. York fade back into obscurity. He had become a symbol of faith, of courage, of the common soldier rising to uncommon heights, and though he did not seek it, he would spend the rest of his life living in the long shadow of that October morning in the Argonne forest. After the war, Alvin C. York longed for a return to the simple life he had known before Europe's trenches reshaped his destiny. But heroes, especially reluctant ones, rarely get to slip quietly back into the shadows. York's story had captured the heart of a nation, and with it came expectations, demands, and responsibilities he had never asked for. York faced them with the same humility he carried into battle. He married Gracie Williams, the woman he had loved before the war, and together they built a life rooted in family, faith, and service. But York knew the poverty of the Tennessee hills all too well, and he understood that the children growing up there deserved more than the harsh limitations he had known. So, instead of taking money for himself, he devoted his fame to a cause: education. He founded the York Institute, a school dedicated to lifting young men and women from the grip of rural hardship, giving them opportunities he never had. It wasn't easy. Funding was scarce. Politics interfered. But York persisted, securing land, raising donations, and pouring every ounce of energy into the project. In his eyes, the true measure of a man was not the medals he wore, but the good he left behind. As the decades passed, America changed. New wars erupted. The world entered. the Great Depression, then World War II, and through it all, York remained a symbol of steadfast integrity. When Hollywood asked to make a film about his life, York agreed only after securing funding for the school he believed in so passionately. The result, Sergeant York 1941, became a patriotic triumph, with Gary Cooper portraying the quiet hero's journey from pacifist to Medal of Honor recipient. The film brought York's story to new generations, reinforcing his status as an American legend. Yet even as fame surrounded him, Alvin York remained unchanged. He lived modestly, he refused to glorify violence, and he never forgot the weight of the lives he had taken in the Argonne forest. In later years, York struggled with health issues. He rarely spoke of the war, and when he did, it was with sorrow, reverence, and humility. He believed deeply that courage was not found in the taking of life, but in the willingness to protect others no matter the cost. And when he died in 1964, the nation mourned not just a war hero, but a man whose life embodied the quiet strength that defines true valor. A legacy that endures today. More than a century after that fateful day in 1918, the legacy of Alvin C. York continues to echo across time. His actions remain one of the most extraordinary feats in American military history. His character, humble, faithful, unwavering, sets a standard few can match. And his life reminds us that the greatest heroes are often the ones who never seek the title. York's story is more than a tale of war. It is a testament to conviction, to conscience, to the belief that even the quietest soul can rise to meet destiny when called. His footsteps still echo in the Tennessee hills. His courage still inspires generations of soldiers and civilians alike. And his name endures, not as a symbol of destruction, but as a beacon of integrity, sacrifice, and humanity. This is the legacy of Sergeant Alvin C. York, a man who walked into the storm with faith, emerged with honor, and left an indelible mark on history.